Chad Ruhwedel and Matthew Robertson are back with the New York Rangers on one-year deals. What role will Ruhwedel play this season? And is Matthew Robertson ever going to make his NHL debut?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1112 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. So I want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate with your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Start hiring now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. So yeah, obviously the Rangers have been somewhat busy recently, re-signing a trio of free agents. We talked about Braden Schneider in our most recent episode. He is back with the Rangers on a 2-year deal. He was an RFA, and they obviously came to terms on an extension there for Braden Schneider. And Ryan Lindgren also remains an RFA. We'll see if and when a deal gets done between Lindgren and the New York Rangers. And they also re-sign a couple of, smaller free agents, I guess you could say. We've got the veteran journeyman in Chad Ruhwedel, and we've got the former second-round pick in Matthew Robertson. So we're going to talk about both of them today and what we can expect from each of them going forward. And we'll start with Chad Ruhwedel. So on Friday, we actually posted an episode. It went live around 12:30. I had recorded it the day before. We set it to go live on Friday at 12:30 Eastern time. And in that episode, I spent some time talking about Chad Ruhwedel and why I think it would be a good move for the Rangers to re-sign him on a 1-year deal and keep him in the fold going forward for this upcoming season. And lo and behold, not more than about 2 hours after that episode published and went live on YouTube and, of course, on all audio platforms as well, the Rangers had done exactly that. They re-signed Chad Ruhwedel to a 1-year deal worth the league minimum of $775,000. It is also a two-way deal. I know there's going to be some Ranger fans that roll their eyes at this re-signing here and, oh yeah, big move by Chris Drury there, re-signing Chad Ruhwedel. Stanley Cup, here we come. I totally get it. I get where you're coming from. It's certainly not the most exciting, signing or transaction that you'll ever see the Rangers make. But if you look at this deal for what it is, it's not so bad. And I would even argue that it's actually a good deal. You got to fill out your roster, somehow, some way. And we know the salary cap in the NHL can be pretty tight. And the last couple of guys on your roster, the third pair defensemen, the fourth line forwards, and certainly guys that are healthy scratches. For the most part, those are going to be guys making the league minimum or just a shade above it. And that is certainly the case here with Chad Ruhwedel. You're not going to have 6 defensemen making Adam Fox kind of money. That's just not reality. And again, if you're disappointed with what the Rangers did this offseason, or maybe more accurately what they did not do, again, I totally get it. Go off in the comments section, get it off your chest, do whatever you got to do. For the most part, I'm there with you. I think it could have been a little bit better of an offseason for the Rangers, but again, you have to fill out your roster. And for what this signing is, it's completely fine. Ruhwedel, by all ways of looking at this, it certainly seems like he's going to be back as the Ranger number 7 defenseman going forward. And I do think there's some things about Ruhwedel that make him an ideal number 7 defenseman. To begin with, NHL experience. He's been around for a while and spent the last handful of seasons with the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's also physical. For somebody that doesn't get a ton of ice time when he is in the lineup, he does tend to throw his weight around. We saw that a little bit during the 5 games that he played with the Rangers after coming over at the trade deadline this past season. And he's somebody that, by the looks of things, won't lose the game for you. And if you got a number 7 defenseman that has to sub into the lineup for this reason or for that reason, that's all you can really ask for. You don't expect them to go out there and get a multi-point night. You expect them to be a good, solid stay-at-home defenseman that hopefully just doesn't make a lot of mistakes. And I think that Chad Ruhwedel does fit the bill for that. And on top of that, he fills a need. The Rangers really didn't have a prototypical number 7 defenseman on their team before this re-signing occurred. You could always go with Ben Harper. He'll be back from injury. You could go with a Connor Mackey, a Brandon Scanlon, whatever it might be. But a lot of those guys have very little NHL experience. Chad Ruhwedel has quite a bit more experience than all those guys I just mentioned. And again, I think just a better all-around player and somebody that seems tailor-made at this point to be a number 7 defense. And whether it's with the Rangers or really any team in the NHL. And the bottom line for me, You need a number 7 defenseman. You had Chad Ruhwedel here this past season. He played well during limited spot duty, when he was in the lineup due to some injuries for the Rangers. And again, something that I mentioned in our most recent episode, you gave away a 4th-round draft pick to one of your biggest rivals, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And that being the case, might as well make it count a little bit, keep this guy in the fold, and he can be a Ranger for at least one more season and fill out the lineup as the number 7 defenseman. Now, as far as like potential competition between Chad Ruhwedel and Zach Jones, I really don't see it. I feel like it's going to be Jones. I feel like they want Zach Jones to take over as the number 6 defenseman. They should want Zach Jones to take over as the number 6 defenseman. And they might frame it as a competition. They very likely will do that and, say, hey, nothing's given. And, Zach Jones, for his part, I'm sure he'll say all the right things and I got to earn my place and everything. But barring a major upset, Zach Jones is going to be out there on opening night and he'll get the vast majority of playing time over Chad Ruhwedel. Now, could there be, a game where maybe the Rangers are up against like an ultra physical opponent? Maybe they're expecting some trouble and you go with the bigger defenseman in Chad Ruhwedel over Zach Jones. That's at least possible. I could see that happening from time to time. But again, I think that's certainly going to be Zach Jones's job to lose. And frankly, the Rangers should want that to be the case because Chad Ruhwedel, again, I think he's a solid defenseman, especially in this role as a number 7 guy. But you're talking about a 34-year-old veteran player. I was going to say journeyman, but he hasn't really played for that many teams. But bottom line, a 34-year-old defenseman, a veteran, somebody that's certainly never been a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. That's the guy that's better suited as your number 7 defenseman and being the healthy scratch. Zach Jones, this is your guy if you're the New York Rangers. You drafted him in the 3rd round. He's somebody that's kind of been knocking on the door the last couple of years, and now the coast is finally clear for him to take over and emerge as that number 6 defenseman. So the Rangers should be pulling for Zach Jones to take the bull by the horns during training camp, during the preseason, and becoming ultimately the Ranger number 6 defenseman. So unless there's a situation where, Chad Ruhwedel just vastly outplays Zach Jones during the training camp and outplays him in the preseason, the Rangers just decide they want to go with a little bit heavier of a lineup, and Pierre Laviolette likes the idea of putting the veteran defenseman out there. I can't foresee any situation in which, Chad Ruhwedel is out there in place of Zach Jones. But I do think Ruhwedel can, should, and will be the first man up as far as Ranger defensemen are concerned. If there's an injury, and we know all 6 defensemen aren't going to play all 82 games, so we will see Chad Ruhwedel at some point. I do think you're looking at a situation where he is your healthy scratch, going into the season, and will remain likely in that role unless there's any injuries at one time or another for the 6th defenseman that you would expect to be out there for the New York Rangers. But we're keeping everything rolling in just a second here. I want to shift our attention to another defenseman that was re-signed by the Rangers, and that would, of course, be Matthew Robertson, and we will do that in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. We are driven for the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out, as always, to the everydayers. Means the world that you guys continue to support this podcast, preseason, regular season, postseason, and even now in the offseason. You guys keep showing up, and I certainly do appreciate that. And you definitely going to want to stick around. We're going to have the long-awaited crossover with Locked On Pittsburgh Penguins. I do believe that's going to be happening within the next couple of days here, and definitely looking forward to that. Always good to check in on a division rival. Going to have some questions for those guys about New York Ranger Riley Smith and a bunch of other topics as well. But for right now, let's keep our eye on a couple of recent New York Ranger transactions. We just got done talking about Chad Ruhwedel. Time to move on to Matthew Robertson, 6'4", 209-pound defenseman. There we go. 23 years old. He is back with the Rangers on a one-year deal. It's a two-way deal as well. It's Monday as I'm recording this, and as this episode is being produced here, as of this moment, Matthew Robertson re-signed with the Rangers just a couple of hours ago. So he's back in the fold. He had been an RFA. He's only 23 years old, as I just mentioned a second ago, but the fact that we have not yet seen him play in a single game with the New York Rangers, I think does not tend to bode all that well for Robertson. He's one of those prospects that had a lot of hype, had a lot of buzz, and you've heard considerably less of that in recent seasons. He is a former second-round draft pick, went number 49 overall to the Rangers. And look, 23 is not ancient. We've seen guys debut, older than that for sure. But this is also a Ranger team that typically has no issues, no qualms about debuting somebody when they're very young. I mean, think about some of these guys like Adam Fox, Ryan Lindgren, Keandre Miller, Braden Schneider. I mean, I just named the entire blue line, basically. All those guys, the entire kid line, all of them debuted at a very young age. Will Cooley was very young, 2 years ago, and certainly last year as well. Brandon Hoffman, we saw him for a cup of coffee last season, and he might make the team out of training camp. We'll see if he does. Brett Bard's got a shot at it as well. I don't think there's really any chance that Matthew Robertson's going to make the team, though, and he's a little bit older than some of those guys that I just mentioned, or in a lot of cases, maybe the same age. And again, there's just been very little buzz about Matthew Robertson the last couple of seasons here. Very little reason to believe that the Rangers are considering putting him on their NHL roster, but we'll give him a fair trial here. This is what he has done so far. He has spent 3 seasons with the Hartford Wolfpack, 190 games, 10 goals, 45 assists, so 55 points. He was a minus 25 in that time as well. And this past year, career high 68 games, 4 goals, 17 assists, 21 points, and a career worst minus 11. He's been minus 7 in each of the 2 seasons before that. Plus minus isn't everything, but definitely at least worth pointing out there. Nevertheless, I do think this is a good deal for the Rangers. I mean, their only other real option would have been to trade Matthew Robertson, and I don't really see what the point of that would be, because as we've talked about here, his stock has dropped considerably in recent seasons. So if nothing else, I mean, just re-sign him, have him be a defenseman for the Wolfpack, and hopefully he can pick up his game a little bit. At that point, maybe he reestablishes some of his value, and the Rangers could use him as a trade chip to a team looking to acquire him, at or near the trade deadline this season. Or maybe he gets it together and he's a little bit of a late bloomer and he eventually develops into somebody that can be an NHL defenseman. The other thing, too, if you look to trade him, the Rangers don't have any leg to stand on as far as what they would ask for in return. I mean, what do you get for Matthew Robertson at this point? A 4th-round pick, a 5th-round pick? That's not even worth it. Might as well just keep him in the fold. And maybe, new coach this year for the Wolfpack, maybe he can reach him. And maybe Matthew Robertson can develop into a solid NHL defenseman for the Rangers. We will see. If he does play well, it's possible at least that he climbs the pecking order a little bit. You've got to figure that at a certain point, they want Matthew Robertson to jump guys, and it's nothing against these players, but they're mostly journeymen. Guys like, Brandon Scanlon, Connor Mackey, Ben Harper. You would think the Rangers would eventually want their homegrown guy to overtake players like that and possibly establish himself as a call-up at some point this season for the Rangers. And I know everything has to be earned, but this is a point that I really wanted to make. I'd like to see Matthew Robertson start this upcoming season on the top pairing with the Hartford Wolfpack. And again, I don't want to just give it to him. That doesn't send the best message. But I feel like we're getting to the point where it is a little bit sink or swim time for Matthew Robertson. So put him on a top pairing, put him in important roles, have him out there on the PK, maybe the power play if he can handle that as well. Just see what you've got, see how he does, see how he handles it, give him a ton of ice time, and just get as good and as long of a look at Matthew Robertson as you possibly can. And as far as that being unfair to the other defensemen on the Wolfpack, I hear you if you're, opining that. But there's really no reason not to do it. There's no other defenseman on the Wolfpack right now that the Rangers really see as a massive prospect. In a lot of ways, a lot of these guys are, NHL journeymen, or they're guys that, Victor Mancini is there. He's probably going to be on the Wolfpack to start the season, but he's a former 5th-round pick. There's nobody there that has to be getting more ice time and more of a look than Matthew Robertson, at least not in my very humble opinion. So just throw him out there, top pairing, sink or swim, see how it goes, and see if you have somebody that could eventually develop into an NHL defenseman. And as far as the question of, will Matthew Robertson ever play in the NHL? I don't think there's really any guarantees at this point. There was a tweet that went out from Vince Mercogliano earlier because he was reacting to the Matthew Robertson re-signing, and Vince had him as the Ranger number 7 left defenseman, not just number 7 defenseman, number 7 left defenseman. And he's got him behind Lindgren, Miller, and Jones. Those three are all pretty obvious. But then he's also got him behind Mackey, Harper, and Scanlon. Now, again, I just talked about those three players. Maybe for the time being, he is indeed behind them. But I get the feeling that the Rangers would love to see him leapfrog those guys in the order. I mean, again, these are, journeyman defensemen who were not homegrown players, not big prospects for the Rangers. So you'd like to believe that the Rangers would hope that Matthew Robertson can eventually get ahead of those guys in the pecking order. And I think eventually we will see Matthew Robertson play in the NHL, possibly for the Rangers, possibly for another team. I get the feeling, though, that we might actually see him this upcoming season, which might be a little bit surprising to some, but hear me out. So the Rangers in recent seasons, they do seem to show this tendency. I touched on this a second ago, but they show this tendency where they're all good with letting young players play. And in some cases, kind of learning on the fly. And sometimes that's worked out well for them. Other times it hasn't worked out so well for them. But we saw, 2 seasons ago, Will Cooley get a chance with the Rangers. They were never going to leave him on the team long-term at the NHL level, but he got 4 games. And this past season, same deal for Brandon Hoffman. He was called up for 3 games. They were never looking at that long-term. Matthew Robertson might be given a similar treatment. And Matthew Robertson, by all accounts, has not played as well in the AHL as either, Cooley or Othman. But I get the feeling where if you get to a situation where the Rangers have multiple defensemen who are out injured, and if Matthew Robertson is playing a little bit better in the AHL, then you might get to a point where they at least give him a shot in the NHL. We're going to give him a chance. We'll get a look at him. Is he ready to go? Can he play at this level? I understand you can't be doing that if it's to the detriment of your team and you're far more likely to lose the game with him in the lineup than you would be if he's not in the lineup. But at a certain point, you just got to get a look, don't you? I mean, that's how I feel. You guys might feel differently, but I do get the feeling that we might see Matthew Robertson for at least a game or two. I don't think it'll be a lengthy stay unless he just shatters all expectations this season. Coming into the league after he was drafted by the Rangers, expectations were high because he's a second-round pick, and the Rangers seem to think highly of him. But obviously, in recent seasons, that shine's kind of worn off a little bit, and people don't seem to have too high expectations. He's kind of the forgotten man as far as like Ranger prospects are concerned. But I do get the feeling, I don't know, it's tough to say for sure, but it's just kind of a hunch, just kind of a gut feeling that I have right now that at one time or another this upcoming season, we'll at least see Matthew Robertson get a chance, possibly a brief one, with the Rangers NHL team, but we shall see. So we're going to keep everything rolling just a second here. I want to shift our attention to the rest of the offseason for the New York Rangers. Going to talk about the big RFA, in-house RFA that the Rangers have. We'll also do some housekeeping as far as other UFAs that are out there, both in-house and out-of-house for the New York Rangers, and just kind of have some thoughts on all those players. And we are going to do that in just a second. All right, let's go keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers before we call it a day. Just want to take a look at the rest of the offseason for the Rangers as far as transactions that they're going to be making and what they still have in front of them. So you've got the big one, the big fish in the pond, so to speak, at this point, Ryan Lindgren. Term seems to be an issue between the Rangers and Ryan Lindgren, although I say that I'm recording this on Monday. By the time this publishes on Tuesday, maybe they will have come to an agreement. And if that's the case, obviously we'll dive into that in the very next episode. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the biggest thing left on the Rangers checklist. Ryan Lindgren has been a top pair defenseman for them for several seasons running now. And he's by far the biggest priority that remains for the New York Rangers as far as their in-house guys are concerned. And really even their out-of-house, targets, whatever out-of-house targets they might have left. As far as UFAs that were with the Rangers last year that have signed with other teams, we've covered the big ones. We've talked briefly about Alex Wenberg, Jack Roslovic. Those guys are now on new teams. One that we haven't covered yet, actually two. We got defenseman Nico Brouillard. He signs with Seattle, 29 years old. He had 5 goals and 31 assists and was a -17 with the Hartford Wolfpack last season. And as it turns out, that was his only season with the Pack. And to date, Brouillard has still never played in the NHL, so he moves on to Seattle. We've also got defenseman Mac Hollowell. He signs with the Pittsburgh Penguins, just 25 years old, only 6 career NHL games. They all occurred with Toronto in 2022, 2023. He did produce offensively for the Rangers this past, or not the Rangers, the Wolfpack this past season. I think I would have remembered if he did this for the Rangers, but he did this for the Wolfpack. 3 goals and 41 assists in 64 games in Hartford. And as it turns out, once again, his only season with the Hartford Wolfpack. And despite having all those points, he somehow was still a -3. Then you've got a list of Ranger UFAs that have still not signed with any team. Blake Wheeler is still out there. I'm not holding my breath. I think the Rangers are going to go in a different direction this season, and not even 100% sure that Wheeler is going to be back, in the NHL next year. It's possible that he decides to hang him up, and obviously that's his decision. And if a team is interested, he has every right to keep playing. But we'll see how that goes. But can't see him being back with the Rangers. You've also got Bobby Trevino. He was an overager and an undersized forward. He put up some pretty awesome seasons in college, more than a point per game in both his junior and senior seasons at UMass. He was an alternate captain as a junior, a captain or the captain as a senior. Senior season, 20 goals and 29 assists in 37 games. So he really put up some points there. Just hasn't really translated to the Hartford Wolfpack. He was undrafted, parts of 3 seasons with Hartford. And, again, just not a ton of scoring last year, only 4 goals and 12 assists in 49 games. So we'll see. I mean, possible that he re-signs with Hartford, possible that some other AHL team gives him a chance. We'll see how it shakes out. You've also got Tyler Pitlick. He started this past season with the Rangers. He was actually out there on opening night over Jimmy Vesey. And I'm glad that Vesey was able to eventually claim that spot because he's, very clearly the better player. Pitlick, I mean, you got to figure he walks in free agency. There are probably other teams out there where he's got a better chance of playing in the AHL than he does with the Rangers. I just don't think he's going to be very high in the pecking order when it comes to the Rangers, and just cannot see him making the Rangers opening night roster, especially after they waived him and then never brought him back up. He was with the Wolfpack for the rest of the season after that. And then you've also got center Nick Patan. He came over last year in a trade. The Rangers dealt Turner Elson to Minnesota. Patan came over in return. Patan has played 170 career NHL games, 15 games for the Wolfpack last year, 3 goals, 5 assists. Did also play 6 games with the Wild last year before being dealt to the Rangers. But obviously, once he got here, he was with the Hartford Wolfpack for the rest of the season, never did play a game for the NHL. And, we'll see how it goes, but kind of the same deal. I feel like Patan will probably end up somewhere else. There's probably another team where he's got a better path to playing time in the NHL than he would with the Rangers. And then you've got a group of unrestricted free agents who are still out there, and it's slim pickings at this point, but a couple that kind of caught my eye at least a little bit. I don't think the Rangers will sign any of these guys, but just to toss a couple of names, James Van Riemsdyk is still out there. Philip Zadina is still out there. I would probably, of all the UFAs remaining, it's either him or Sprong as far as, my favorite player that remains. Sprong, obviously, had a pretty good season for Detroit last year. I don't know why he's still a UFA. Zadina is young. I believe he's 24 or 25 and does seem to have some scoring upside, so he'd probably be my top pick. But then you've also got guys like Max Pacioretty, Tyler Johnson. I'm not holding my breath here for the Rangers signing any of these guys, and clearly none of these guys are perfect players. But look, if you've got a favorite and you want me to talk about one of these guys in a future episode and the possibility of the Rangers signing them on a 1-year deal, then let me know in the comment section or email me. I can certainly do that. We already covered Daniel Sprong. You can go back a few episodes and hear my thoughts on him. We also talked about Chad Ruhwedel in the episode right before the Rangers re-signed him. And of course, he is now back in the fold with the New York Rangers. But I figure we could pretty much call it there for today. I did want to mention that we will be doing our Locked On New York Rangers Fantasy League for the 5th straight year, 5 seasons of this. Do you guys believe that? So if you played last year, your spot is secure. All you have to do is DM me on Twitter or email me, and I will save your spot for the upcoming season as well. If you did not play last year and you want to get into the league, email me or DM me now. And depending on how many people don't return from last year, we'll save your spot in line, and we'll, eventually, we'll give everybody that played last year a chance. But once a certain amount of time goes by, we'll open the door to new players this season. So definitely get in touch if you're interested in joining the Fantasy League. Happy to take any questions for the mailbag. We're going to be doing a special mailbag episode in the not too distant future. And also going to be doing a Locked On Hartford Wolfpack episode in the not too distant future as well. And just kind of talk about what to expect from them and, who the standouts might be and which players from the Wolfpack might have the best chance of making an impact for the Rangers this upcoming season. But that will do it for today, guys. Once again, if you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, at @LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, that's at @LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to the Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.